Y'all know what it is.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Eggs. Today we have special guest, founder and CEO of Profasee, Chad Rubin. Chad is a lifelong entrepreneur. In 2008, he decided to set up his first e-commerce shop, Crucial Vacuum, selling vacuum cleaner parts out of his garage. It was a great success, and it wasn't long before that site exploded from just one to thousands of different SKUs. But that experience showed Chad one thing, that due to a lack of proper technology to manage their growth and literally thousands of products, their warehouse had become an absolute jungle to manage. So, to solve his own problem, Chad created Skubana, which has since gone on to become one of the most powerful operations platforms in e-commerce. On the back of that platform, Crucial Vacuum evolved from selling vacuum cleaner parts exclusively to cover all the replacement parts for your home. It also got a new name, Think Crucial. Skubana was eventually acquired by 3PL Central, and in addition to the continued success of Think Crucial, in 2021, Chad launched his latest venture, Profasee. Profasee is a platform that enables Amazon resellers to dynamically predict the perfect price at the perfect time for the products they sell, using AI and comprehensive data management. Joining us today for a conversation about his entrepreneurial journey, starting, scaling, and selling businesses, the state of e-commerce, and so much more, please join us in welcoming to the show, Chad Rubin. Hey, Chad, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. That was quite the introduction. Loved it.
Well, hopefully it was right. I will say that I had to kind of cobble together information from a bunch of different sources, and so hopefully it's more or less accurate.
Surprisingly, actually, it was very comprehensive and spot on.
Excellent. Perfect. I'll take it. So cool. Well, let's kind of, I guess, start at the beginning. Obviously, we covered a little bit of it there, but let's go back even earlier and talk about sort of the beginnings of your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, so the beginnings, wow. Okay, let's go back in time. So I grew up, my father owned a vacuum store and always was struggling to make ends meet. So one of the things growing up was I said, I never want to be an entrepreneur and I never want to be in the vacuum business. And sure enough, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So, but before I made that realization, I was a first generation college grad. I went onto Wall Street and I survived 3 head cuts during the Great Recession. And then finally, I was actually fired from my role on Wall Street. And during that time, I was covering internet stocks on Wall Street. So I was advising hedge funds, institutional investors to buy, sell, or short various stocks, one of them being Amazon. So I went to my parents and I was like, hey guys, you have this brick and mortar store and Walmart just opened up next to you. What if we start selling parts online? And sure enough, I started doing all the marketing and my mom started doing all the customer support. My dad was doing all the fulfillment. And that's really what began the journey to where I am today.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. Well, and it's cool, the insight that you had about Amazon. It's funny. I used to work for a guy in the cleaning business too, this guy named Don Aslett. And Don is an author and known as the world's #1 cleaning expert. But his whole thing was, kind of like you're describing. I mean, selling vacuums is a tough game. And so in their case, they made a connection with QVC and that became their big channel, right? So they sell through QVC. But in your case, you were able to pick up Amazon. And I think that, if we're talking, in 2008, this, that's not the same Amazon as today. So it's quite the insight to recognize that as the sort of future of e-commerce, I guess.
Yeah, there's been a massive gold rush to selling on Amazon. So when I first started, I was probably in the first 100 sellers on Amazon. Wow. And back then, margin profile was so much different. The loopholes were different. The way that you won in business at that point in time was different than what it is today. It's gotten a lot more competitive, but I'm definitely an OG in the space.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, can you talk about those early days then? I mean, like we mentioned at the top, I mean, basically, as your business grew and as you started, I guess, to catch the Amazon wave, I guess, things started to move and started to grow, and your business went from a single SKU to many thousands. And that was when you had sort of these insights about, we need some sort of platform or something to manage this inventory. And so do you mind talking about that a little bit? And maybe we should talk a little bit too about sort of, I guess, how you got from finance to actually building software.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty big jump. So let's just chop up the question into a few pieces. The first one was, well, how did we scale the business? Is that where you want me to start?
Actually, maybe it makes more sense to talk about the switch, because I mean, at least the way that I understand it, it seems you founded the Skubana business, which basically was your inventory management platform.
Yep.
And so it might make sense to just sort of talk about that transition. I mean, so you started the business coming out of finance, but I mean, obviously at some point you were building your own
Yeah. So we started with one vacuum filter, then it went to two, then to three, then we just like created so many different vacuum filters. We did vacuum bags, belts, hoses. And then I was like, well, why don't I combine what I'm passionate about with what I know? So I know filters. I love coffee. So for me, the logical progression was coffee, but it no longer fit under the Crucial vacuum umbrella, which is how we launched Think Crucial. Then, as we started to scale and as e-commerce started to evolve and mature, marketplaces propped up and your own organic platform could pop up and you can create a storefront overnight. And so we started to scale on multiple channels. And that's when I hit another itch, right? Where you have this like, oh crap moment where you stub your toe and you're like, wait, why does it have to be that way? Why do I have to use these inferior softwares that are point solutions that keep breaking, that don't actually support my order volume? There needs to be a better way. And so I had no idea. I mean, this is before like I think SaaS was like the next, technology really took off. And I started thinking about solving this problem. And we started building towards dog fooding and solving my own problem with the opportunity to solve it for other people that are going through the same thing.
Okay. So you created a software solution for that to be able to kind of manage the different product lines and everything. What were some hurdles and things you had to overcome in developing the software to integrate with Amazon and work together nicely?
Yeah, so Amazon has an API, and back then it was not as robust as it is now. There's a lot more available via Amazon. But one of the things that we were solving for that was probably the hardest was you had a shipping software that was separate from inventory, and you had a separate analytics software, and none of those softwares really talk to each other, right? So if you have all these people, their hands are in different cookie jars and they're using different softwares, you have no source of truth. So we actually were the first platform to combine orders and inventory, which is, if you think about it, is e-commerce, right? You have commerce and then you add an E to it. And now you have the digital shelf space, and shipping and inventory need to go hand in hand, because when you ship something out, it deducts the inventory, and we didn't have that problem solved back in the day, which is how we started Skubana.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting because, and maybe it's because we talk to so many people who are sort of doing this in the modern environment, right? Where there's a lot of software solutions already available and they can do these things. The hurdles to try and overcome all the little problems that were popping up along the way and solving those things, must have been an interesting challenge. So let's talk, I guess, a little bit then about sort of the growth of Skubana and its ultimate acquisition. So, I think one of the things that a lot of young entrepreneurs and people like that who listen to this show might be interested in is this idea of growing a company, scaling a company, and making it, attractive to potential buyers. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of positioning that thing for sale.
Yeah, so like 7 years of high highs and low lows of building that company, right? It was definitely some moments, right, where it was painful, and there were some glorious, beautiful days on top of it. And I think not a lot of people talk about the two. But it wasn't just like, hey, we built it and we're going to sell it. It was like, hey, software in itself, right? You have to keep on creating, keep on innovating, keep on adding value, keep on adding features and functionality, making your customers happy. And as long as you're delivering enough value at some point, right, you get rewarded for it. And we were lucky that we were helping businesses flourish, especially during a pandemic, during COVID, when there was a shift of spend that happened from brick and mortar to the online world. And we were really positioned to help those businesses make that transition efficiently and effectively without a massive burden of an implementation, because our software was like out of the box. So it's kind of being at the right place at the right time, and really working on a software for 7 years that suddenly there's this massive craze towards online retail, and we were positioned to capitalize and help companies make that switch and stay in business as their retail stores were getting shut down.
Yeah, no, I think that's really smart. And it's funny, I like that you sort of highlighted the ups and downs, point, even though we sort of just glazed over that, this idea that there's sort of ups and downs, because we have a lot of guests who talk about this sort of phenomenon where, by the time we're interviewing them, they have accomplished several things. They're, successful in their own right, these kinds of things. And everybody gets sort of accused of being this, overnight success, when in reality, in your case, you were building software for 7 years. It's not like it just happened, right? But because you did the hard work early on, eventually you got the reward. I mean, maybe we're not wishing for pandemic, but at the same time, you were in a great position to take advantage of that opportunity when it came. So can you talk though about the decision to sell? Like, so, I mean, okay, you're great, you're positioned, you're in an awesome spot to do this thing. Like, what was the motivation or what was the pitch that made it appealing to you to sell the organization when, I mean, really, this was the peak time, right? So why not just keep it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of awareness, self-awareness as a business owner and as an entrepreneur of knowing when to hold them and when to fold them, right? There's an art to the arc of your career or the career of you building a business, and knowing when's like the absolute right time. And I just felt it deep inside of myself that this was a great offer and the right time to move on from the company.
Did
Yeah.
they approach you, or did you approach them for the acquisition?
Yeah. You know what? It was all about just partnerships. It was like I had an idea of how we can collaborate together, and I presented that idea. And then sure enough, the conversation shifted a bit. Right. I had an idea of a way that by working together and partnering together, we can create some value. And then they had a different intention in mind, and one thing led to another.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. So one of the things that I think you're sort of alluding to at this idea of balance is, it's the buzzy word, right? This idea of work-life balance. But I think it's interesting to talk to a, successful entrepreneur who's obviously done his share of hustling and talk to him in the sort of the realm of self-care, right? I mean, I think some of it comes with, maybe financial stability and other things like that. But I think that the fact that you were willing to prioritize yourself, the way you were feeling, listening to your emotions, all that kind of stuff, right? These are sort of the touchy-feely skills that we don't really talk about with entrepreneurs very often. A lot of times it's the hustle, it's the, working all night to get stuff done. It's, it's that kind of story. And so I wonder if you could talk about your sort of, I guess, influences. Like, were you always sort of that kind of guy who was always open to, listening to his own emotions? Or like, is that something that you had to develop after years of hustle?
Yeah. So first of all, balance is a very nefarious word. And I can't promise I've always balanced appropriately. That's for sure. I've definitely, especially now, I'm even struggling through balancing and making sure that I have all these pieces. I'm being a husband and a father and a CEO and a stakeholder of the company and a fiduciary responsibility to investors. I'm constantly in this level of balance. And I don't even know if it's balance or just like integrating that into my life and fitting pieces in when I can and just actually managing more efficiently. So in terms of like your question, I just want to clarify that. But in terms of like just, I've always been a sensitive person. I think I've always been an aware person. And I think that there's always an opportunity to become more aware over time. And yeah, so I think I've always had that awareness inside of me, and like another consciousness of like thinking through things, and sometimes to my disadvantage, right? Overthinking and like spinning on things and not staying grounded in the moment. My wife's she owns a yoga studio. And so she helps me keep my feet on the ground and stay super focused on the task at hand and current reality. So I think that helps me slow it down a bit.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to share that like I got even deeper into myself once the sale happened. I'm happy to talk more about that if that's an interesting node to go down.
That's actually how we came across each other, as I think a post about all the things you did after the acquisition. You're learning how to DJ, you're learning how to do this and that. And as a DJ, I had to comment on it. So that's how we made a connection there.
Yeah. So with the sale, right, like a lot of time was freed up, and I can now stop like always trying to look after others and the interests of others, whether it's employees, investors. But this was the first opportunity in my life where I was like, I have my son, my family, and I have my wife, And how can I come out of this period version 3.0 of myself? The best version of myself. I can either just jump right in, right? Jump right into something new. So I had no shortage of ideas. I had a journal list of all the problems that I think could be solved for. And instead of doing that, I focused on how do I hire coaches to focus on priorities in my life that I want to spend more time in and achieve some level of excellence. So, like you mentioned, Michael, it was DJing, chess, nutrition, spiritual coach, breathwork coach, like a life coach, a therapist, so many different things. I got boxing in there and CrossFit. So I started just really devoting a lot of energy and love into those areas of my life that were neglected. And I do feel like I call that period the Great Reset for myself. I feel like I came out of that period a much better human and also manifested a unshakable trust in myself during that time.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Especially, I mean, first of all, this awareness, this being willing to, I guess, actively evolve, right? I mean, everybody changes and we're always evolving over time naturally, but a lot of people don't take an active role in that, so I think that's a good insight, there. I wondered if you had any thought. Yeah, I mean, do you feel like entrepreneurial culture as a whole is evolving more this direction, like to from the early, Bezos hustle days, from the step on everybody's throat and get yourself to the top kind of culture that maybe was more prominent years ago? Have you seen an evolution, and do you think it's a good thing?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so as you become more comfortable or privileged, right, you can essentially start going up this ladder. And even if, like, let's just say I start deploying more time into being aware or more into self-love or self-improvement, there's always this reaction side of me that wants to go back to the homeostasis, sort of deviating back to the norm. And it's constantly reminded to me that I need to sit with these other things that I have going on in my life to create that balance. So I can't speak on behalf of like entrepreneurs in general, but I think overall to create something beautiful and rewarding, I do think it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of hustle. And I hate to use that word, but it takes a lot of like grinding and sometimes pain that was unintended of yourself or others, and hard decisions, and still trying to incorporate other practices and other modalities into your life as you're building this thing just requires a certain special awareness and consciousness.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I wanted to ask you too about sort of just, you described that you were taking all these things that were sort of unrelated to your profession, right? I mean, obviously, at this point you're a tech guy, you still have your background in finance, you have all these things to lean on that you've developed skills over a lifetime. But now you started looking at more, I guess, esoteric things, right? You're doing yoga, you're boxing, you're, doing all these other things that maybe don't have a straight path to entrepreneurship. But I wondered if you talk about just sort of developing, I guess, excellence or becoming excellent at different things or developing acuity in different skills, and how that sort of can forward you as an entrepreneur. Like maybe it has something to do with the skill set of acquiring excellence or becoming excellent in something, or maybe it has something to do with, actually learning something wild, like, I don't know, maybe how to meditate, but that gives you clarity for business. Like, is there something in your experience you can talk about where you tie this, I guess, hiatus that you've had, this opportunity to chase down the stuff that you want, and how that's sort of, I guess, pushed you maybe even further as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So one example, I was actually taking freestyle lessons. Okay. I know it sounds crazy.
Nice.
And freestyle lessons, and it can't come natural to me. I cannot tell you I'm good at it, right? But I would do exercises with this freestyle coach. And there's something in freestyling where you hit brain plasticity. Essentially, we're only using 10% of our brain at any given time. Like, there's so much potential to maximize in our brain, like beyond consciousness. So how do you tap into that? Freestyling lets you get into this flow state, right? I don't know if you ever heard of this in the rap world, but you get into this flow state where like there's nothing else on your mind, and it's kind of like seeing the Matrix, right? Like, if you've ever seen the show The Matrix, you're seeing all these numbers, and Neo sees all these numbers, and he's like, oh, I see it. I see where I'm at. And in the world. So I think getting into that flow state, right, and giving your mind a break and opens up a lot of doors. So I know there was a moment for me during this great reset where I was able to really discover my mission. It just came to me. Like, I never had a mission before. And I was always like, why don't I know my purpose or mission in life? And it sounds weird, right? But I've been like building, partially because I come from a very poor family, right? And I think I was like always trying to prove to myself that I can take things to the next level. But what if there's a different approach, right? And I discovered my mission in this period, which is to elevate the human condition through sacred moments. I love having like ceremonial experiences. It could be tea, it could be incense, it could be a fruit ceremony, it could be smoking hookah, it could be like all these different things. But I love creating this moment where you like check, people like stop looking at their phones, they disconnect and connect in the moment, and it activates potential in people. And that is my purpose and mission. And that all came from this flow state stuff that I'm talking about.
Like
Yeah.
that.
So that's awesome. I was gonna say, so do you think it's true that like, because I think that this is something that people struggle with, which is that this taking time for yourself or taking a moment for yourself, and maybe, like you mentioned, as you move up this ladder of I guess success, or as we move to a place of more privilege, as you make more money and you become more stable and that sort of thing as you grow. Do you think, like, it seems easy for a person at that level to say something like, oh, well, you just need to take a week off or take a month off and go talk, but I think for your average person who's like in it, this idea of taking time for themselves almost feels like it's counter to the cause, it's like somehow opposite. But in reality, they might actually come back better if they did. And so I wonder if that, if that's an experience that you can sort of share, and maybe I'm not articulating it very well, but I guess the idea is, taking time for yourself, and, maybe that actually moves the ball further, because you get into these flow states and all that kind of stuff, and you give yourself the opportunity to think when you're not caught up in the day-to-day operation of an organization.
Yeah, so I think you're answering the question for me, right? So tomorrow I have a facial in the middle of the day. Next week I have a deep tissue massage. There's I would say, things that are table stakes. Like for me, like working out 4 times a week is table stakes. But to me, that's not self-love. That's self-care. It's showing that I'm caring for my body. But self-love is one more step forward, not something that I have to do, but something that I can do. And I really try to focus and look at my calendar 1 week out to try to plan on those things of what I want to accomplish. And so by sitting in a massage, I am giving myself time to process. It's almost like, I know I'm going to probably date myself, right? But do you remember back in the day, you have these like Windows PCs and you had to defrag them over time?
Yeah.
And you'd sit there and you'd be like, oh, my computer is defragging, it's defragmenting. And so I think sitting in a massage or meditating, doing Wim Hof breathing or any of these things, whatever like lights you up and gets you into the state is your defragmentation process. Working out for me is not defragging. Working out for me is like taking care of my body. I was pre-diabetic, right? I changed my nutrition. I like challenge myself and I do some hard things in these workouts. And it's just like showing to myself I can do hard things and challenging myself. But I do like to categorize that there's a difference between that and self-love.
Love that. I was wondering if we could maybe pivot a little bit here and talk about, so when you taught at General Assembly, but you didn't teach as a software instructor, you taught as marketing for the most part. Is that correct?
It was a while ago when GA was very early on. I was teaching a course on like how to go direct to consumer. So how do you cut out the middleman, go direct? How do you spy on some competitors? How do you figure out the problem that needs to be solved? That's really what I was speaking on back in the day.
Okay. So when you started Skubana and what is it? Think Crucial, did you actually do the software development or did you hire that out?
So I was lucky enough to Think Crucial was Magento site, so I hired that out, and then we moved to we went from Volusion to Magento to Shopify. for Skubana, I actually tried to find somebody to help, and then it just came. I just got lucky. A friend of mine from college introduced me to a friend of his that he met on the tennis court that is a developer. And I started working closely with this developer to develop a solution. So we co-founded Skubana together.
Oh, okay. So it was with someone else. That was the question for the most part was, I went through General Assembly to learn how to code and to learn how to, because I've got ideas of my own. But I'm kind of at this thought process where, it's such a daunting task to actually get an app up and going. And as someone who's trying to learn how to code, trying to learn how to, I need to add a WYSIWYG editor for a field. Now I have 8 hours of research to figure out how to do one simple task. You know what I mean? I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, do you think you could have done this without having someone that already knew how to code, or is it something that you could have done on your own?
So everything in life is trading time for dollars.
Sure.
And I know that that's not my strong suit, coding, for sure.
Yeah.
So which is why I partnered with somebody for that. And so he was responsible for the back of the house, like the engineering and coding, software development, and I was responsible for everything go to market. So anything that touches revenue, so you're looking at sales, marketing, partnerships, customer success, onboarding, hiring, and building those teams to help the business. With Profasee, it's interesting you asked. That was like one of the things I really wanted to challenge myself with for this new entity was what are some things I want to change, right, and build back better. And I think that's the advantage of actually having a win and then being able to build back again differently and better is that you have to have a framework of things that you would want to improve. And one of those things was, I was thinking, I want to try to do this business as a single founder. And I want to do it without, so hiring developers to build this. And I don't know if you saw in the news, but we did a capital raise. We raised 2.3 million, and I'm able to deploy those dollars to hire the right team to help me build this versus having a wife in the business.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand that completely. Do you have any hesitation when it comes to raising capital? Because that changes things when you have an outside investor coming in and contributing to it. Do you still have like the full control, or do they have some sort of say in the matter of what you do and how you approach things now?
Yeah. So the same investor that invests in Profasee is the same investor from Skubana that did our Series A of 5.4 million. And so we know each other very well.
Okay.
Right? And he's seen me at my worst times as an entrepreneur, and he's seen me at my best times. And so I think going in eyes wide open, and was very helpful in those hard times, and he was great during the great times. So it does change things having an investor, no question about it. I'm a very collaborative person. I like to get feedback. I like to see how we can improve. I think an organization is evolving and should be dynamic. And the more smart people I can get around the table that are smarter than me, the better to create the outcome that I'd like for the entity.
Nice.
Yeah. I think
so. Profasee is based a lot off of AI, and as far as like determining, when to buy, how to buy, pricing, and stuff like that. Can you talk about how the implementation of AI worked for working with Profasee? And and AI is kind of like a hot topic right now. It's like it's a buzzword, and I've heard like, I don't know how to say it, but I've heard that it's like propped up a lot higher than it actually is as far as like what it can and can't do. Can you maybe talk about that for us?
I could. So let's just address. So there's no question that AI is a burgeoning new field, right? And we're in a short supply of data scientists and machine learning engineers, and we're still in the very early days of AI. No question about it. I would say the challenge that you're calling attention to, that I want to call attention to as well, is that there's a lot of hype around AI. So everyone's updating their website saying AI in the title and the H1 tag on the marketing site. And yet it's actually masquerading as AI, but it's really just weak logic on the back end. So it's actually not true AI.
Okay.
And that's actually ruining it for a lot of other people because they're actually not they're just throwing the word around and it becomes meaningless over time. So in terms of Profasee specifically, we are true AI and we actually have an algorithm that we've built. So if you go to Instagram or if you go to LinkedIn or you go to Facebook, right, when you click on something or you have dwell time on a photo or an image, there's not somebody in the background that's saying, okay, Michael spent more time on this image, let's diff him more, right? There's essentially a self-learning reinforcement model in the background that's taking all these variables and learning from them and then dishing you the content that's going to essentially hit your dopamine and effectively have you spend more time in the platform, which is what they want. And that's no different from what we've built, but we built it for online Amazon brands right now, which is like we're taking all these behaviors and cues of an Amazon shopper and your competitors. Those all flow into a model, and our model is learning over time and dynamically changing price for you automatically in the background based on all the variables that it's consuming. More, and like humans can't process this amount of variables. It's way too much to process. And by the time you did process it, it's already expired.
Okay, so I'm customer. I'm on Amazon. I'm looking for a vacuum cleaner. You're vacuum cleaner salesman, and you work with Profasee. What does Profasee do for you to help me?
So you're a marketplace brand on Amazon. You're selling on Amazon. You type in the word garlic press, you'll see lots of garlic presses showing up. And Amazon shoppers are leaving behind billions of clues of how they shop, their behaviors, their preferences, their search volume. Profasee takes all that data. We analyze it, we crunch it in real time, and we use machine learning, statistical science, behavioral economics. All of this is baked into our model to pinpoint the optimal price to maximize profitability for that brand. And so right now, Amazon is doing this actually. The Amazon reprices their products 2.1 million times a day.
Holy cow.
Crazy. But yet, Amazon brands that are selling it in the marketplace, there's 5 million of them, don't have access to that same superpower. So I make the analogy of like Uber surge pricing, right? Uber has changing of pricing. It's dynamic. Expedia, when you book a flight on Expedia or Kayak, that price changes from day to day. It's never static. And they essentially are optimizing for every penny of profit possible. And that's really what we're doing for Amazon brands. They optimize their profit contribution automatically using our software.
So does that, so it fluctuates automatically. Do you have like the lowest you're going to sell it for based off of what you paid for it set up, and it's only going to go that low? Or is that, can you, that just seems like a lot going on to have your prices just fluctuate accordingly, and then supply and demand and like all that. I'm not an Amazon seller. I don't have any background in it, but it just seems like a lot to be able to have it refresh automatically and make sure that you're not going to go underwater in the process.
Yeah, so just a couple of things. Number one is brands delineate to us their boundaries. So there's a floor price and a ceiling price that they are adding along with their costs, their all-in costs, and then we do the rest. It's like hitting the yes button.
Okay.
So we want to make it super easy because like the more rules and logic that we give to people, the more room there is for human error. And so there are boundaries that we're given, but once we have those boundaries, we then are optimizing for price. And by the way, you can be changing price on an hourly basis. So if you know that you have the most highest intent visitors coming to your listing on Amazon, and you know that that's the highest conversion window, well, maybe that's time to actually increase the price a bit, right, to maximize profit. Or if you know that you're in a low conversion window with high visitors and maybe they have high intent, you can lower that price during those specific windows, which will increase your velocity and over time maximize the profitability contribution of the business, the absolute dollars that are generated on that SKU.
Okay. So is Profasee like would you log into Profasee instead of Amazon to manage your account, and it's like a third-party plugin that you can actually post new products and everything through Prophecy, or do you manage products through Amazon and manage pricing through Prophecy?
Yeah. So you manage all your products and everything through your Seller Central account on Amazon, and then everything for pricing specifically, like we suck in your listings into the platform, all your products, and then you can apply your cost of goods sold. And like right now with the cohort that we've been working with, we're seeing results of 10 to 12%. And like
Wow.
we're just at the early beginnings of our model.
Wow, that's cool.
It's really, really amazing, especially in a world right now where we have rising costs of raw materials. There's supply chain bottlenecks. I don't know if you guys have been following this at all, but like there's rising costs of advertising spend. And right now there's a storm happening for e-commerce brands. And so there's this shift of like growth at all costs to sustainable, profitable growth. And we are actually building the software at the intersection of that.
That's amazing. So how new is Prophecy? Is it still kind of on the floor level, ground floor level, or has it been around for a few years now?
Oh no, Prophecy is brand new. I left Skubana in October of 21, started Prophecy in December, and made tons of mistakes, learned a lot about machine learning and data science. And then we just announced our raise of 2.3 million, because like we're showing results for the cohort that we're working with, but we're still like at the ground floor. So we're slow to onboard right now. We can only onboard a certain amount of customers at a given time. We're building out tons of new processes to allow us to scale over time. And we're also showing amazing results that are guaranteed. So we've made it like a no-brainer for customers to come on our system and say, hey, if we don't show you a 5% right now, 5% increase in profit, you get your money back.
Huh.
And so it's a great selling proposition.
So what I was going to say, Chad, is I think that little primer on Prophecy actually helps me get into my next point, which was, like I mentioned at the top, we're trying to, pull out some, like, I guess, learnings along the way and stuff like that. And I wanted to talk to you just basically about CEOing and, stepping into another project like this, right? So obviously you had a lot of experience by the time Prophecy came around. But like, your background's in finance, it's not in business administration or business management or anything like that. I mean, like maybe you picked up some of that stuff along the way, but I think there's a lot of people who maybe sell themselves short or sell their abilities short because maybe they don't have the right education or they don't have the MBA or whatever it is, and so instead they just go, and I'm guilty of this too, I just sort of resigned myself to the fact that, well, I'm not going to be a good leader because I didn't get the right training. And I think that there's a lot of people who suffer for that. And so I wondered, as you started the Prophecy process, as you started sort of decided to kick off another company and go into it as an individual and all this stuff, like, can you talk about just sort of the confidence you developed over time in I guess, knowing that you can do it, or maybe your process of approaching a new problem like this? Like, I guess what I'm trying to get to is some sort of learning that isn't necessarily taught in school, but it's something that like I guess, this is something people struggle with, which is, how do I know I'm doing the right thing? And so I wonder if you'd talk about that a little bit, just sort of, this is a whole new challenge, whole new technology, whole new everything for you. Yet somehow you were able to go in and handle it.
Right. So a couple of things, right? Like you're absolutely right. There is no CEO course. Maybe that's a good problem to solve for, but there is no CEO course. There's no academic, there's probably nothing in academia that says, hey, here's the course that you need to take to become a CEO. Here's a course in marketing. Here's a course in advertising. Here's a course in accounting. I think for me, I look at myself as a business builder. So I think part of the thing that makes a lot of entrepreneurs crazy is the fact that somehow we have some sort of chip on our shoulders where we think that we can actually truly solve this problem and we can do this. And so I think it's over time I've been able to, and I don't really think about it. I just kind of just do it. And I can't tell you that I'm the best CEO in the world. I definitely don't have the right, I didn't, as Skubana, for example, like I was always like resource strapped. A lot of the business was bootstrapped. And like, I think it would be great to have a COO and have a chief of staff and have better culture building initiatives. So I think those are areas of improvement, for example. But for me, I just look at myself as a business builder and I try to coach people and help them achieve excellence. I'm definitely one that like rolls up my sleeves, maybe even sometimes more than I should, where I don't delegate enough, right? Because I think I think CEOs typically, if you're doing it the right way, you're like, I'm the visionary, I'm the steward of capital, and I have like maybe a couple of direct reports. So I'm trying to answer your question as best as I can. I guess it's just I just like to get stuff done. I like to build something. I take a lot of joy in building something new, and I just do it without even thinking about that.
Well, tell me if this rings true to you, because what I think it is, or at least one of the many traits of a successful entrepreneur, I think is sort of, I guess, the ability to work with risk. Right. So there's a lot of people who go into business or start a small business, but they're relatively, risk averse. They're not looking to get into, difficult situations. They're not going to mortgage their house and put that on the line or whatever. Right. There's a lot of people who are afraid of taking big risks. And so, but it seems to me that it's a characteristic of sort of, CEOs that are high powered, that there's a little bit of, I guess, tolerance for risk. And I wondered, if that, first of all, rings true to you. And second of all, if that was something that you believe can be developed, or maybe was developed coming through corporate finance, or maybe through watching your family's situation, or, any of the above.
Yeah. So I kind of see it as not actually risk. So first of all, I think for an employee joining, I think that there's de-risking that's happened because this is now my fourth business. Okay. But I had this actually conversation with an employee recently, an early stage employee that joined the company. And I said, look, I'm in the business of actually uncertainty. Like, I think risk is measurable, and uncertainty, you're not aware of what the outcome can be. And so therefore, I'm in the business of like, I have no idea what the future is, but you as an employee coming in can take measured risks to see if this is an opportunity you're willing to take on. So I look at it as uncertainty versus risk.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's a nice delineation, because I think maybe it's because risk is kind of a scary word, right? But so, I mean, maybe it sounds worse than it is. But yeah, I think it's that, sort of willingness to take a chance, right? And I mean, everybody has the opportunity to make their own deal, right? And if they want to, go for it or not, that's possible. I just wondered if there was something in your past, that made you uniquely qualified to deal with that, or sort of see things in that way. If it was a trainable skill or a learnable.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Let me sit with that question for a few seconds, because that's a good one. I guess I have a couple of answers. One is when you grew up with not a lot, I think that when you grow up like trying to figure out how you're going to make ends meet at the dinner table and you're exposed to that, it kind of gives you this drive to want to outperform or achieve more. I'm not saying everybody, I don't want to say it's waxing, but for sure for me, I definitely have always been like looking in the rearview mirror. And I think that's one. And I think the other thing about risk is like, especially now that this is my fourth venture, I have a little bit more comfortability underneath me. Meaning like there's a safety net, right? I'm not going to lose everything if this thing falls apart, which God willing, it won't. And if you're going to spend your time on this planet, I believe, right, you need to be, and time is finite. And there's always gonna be another venture. There's always gonna be another job I can go to. But there's only this one moment in life that I can actually work on this problem. And I want to work on things that really light me up and excite me. And that's how I take if you want to say, calculated risk to work on this versus going into the workforce.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like from your story, and you were talking earlier about, some of the things you did between, starting Profasee and leaving the prior company, these different skills, boxing and these sort of things. And to circle back to that, I wonder if it isn't almost related to this confidence building, right? I mean, of course, maybe now, four businesses in, 4 ventures in, with a couple acquisitions under your belt, you've sort of seen the gamut of business development, right? From basically start to conclusion, from starting an organization to selling it. And, so you've got obviously some practical experience that you can feel there, but it still seems like you have this drive to improve, right? So we're boxing, we're doing CrossFit, we're doing these different things that are, maybe outside of your comfort bubble, so to speak, right? Maybe those weren't things that you mentioned, having been pre-diabetic, or, and having to sort of work your way back from that sort of thing. And so it seems to me that there's a a something going on there where it's a strive to do things that are outside of your comfort bubble. And I think for many that's avoided, right? I think a lot of people do try and live in their comfort bubble. And so, but the fact that you're actively seeking it, even in, I guess, sort of post-business retirement, I think says something about your character. And so I don't know if there's anything in there that you could unpack and turn into like, this is the thing that gives me that drive. But I think it's an interesting observation anyway.
Yeah. So two things. If you actually go to Profasee.com, you go to About Us, you'll see our values. And one of those values is that we do hard things. And if you ask my son, if you said, hey, Remy, his name is Remy, he's 3 years old, what do Rubens do? He's going to tell you, Rubens do hard things. And that's one thing that's one value, right, that I incorporate. So I try to take my personal values for Profasee and make them business values and shower them across the organization. So I think that's an important point, is like, yes, I do challenge myself and I do it often. If you think about, right, when you ask, let's just say my grandfather, and he's sitting on his deathbed and he's 90 years old, and you say to him, hey, like, give me your bio. Give me the story of your life. Give me give me what stands out. What's the timeline of your life? Well, although everybody seeks this sort of balance, right? Is he going to talk about the balance? Absolutely not. He doesn't talk about the highs. He doesn't talk about the lows. And the further you can push those out becomes like the story arc of your life and becomes like your bio. And so I think it's actually a healthy thing to push yourself, because I think that's what we're all striving towards, is like building our lifeline, our story. So that's all I can share on that.
I actually, while you said that, I went to your About page, and I like how you have your credo and the different things that stand out to you. And one of them that is here says you can't go anywhere if you stay in your comfort zone. And in software, which is what I'm trying to do, that's so relevant. It's incredible how it just nails it right on the head. And really what it comes down to is, like, you can sit and work with HTML and CSS all day, every day, and get really good at it. But until you try and write an algorithm, or until you try and do the thing that is hard, that you don't want to do, until you take that first step and actually attempt it, you're never going to learn it. You're never going to move forward. And I just wanted to point that out. This is really cool. I like this About Us page and how you put this together. So
thanks, Michael. I appreciate it.
So
yeah, I mean, we definitely don't stay like with Profasee. I'm really biting off a lot, right? Like, I don't have any experience with data science or machine learning or AI. I don't have experience of running a software company as a single founder. I've never built a software that focuses on the revenue stream and profit versus, Skubana was an expense or a cost focus of businesses as an operating platform and an ERP system. So like, there's a lot of like news, right? All those are new things that I've never conquered before. And I wanted to just chew on something different and make it awesome.
So we're kind of getting to that time. It's almost the hour mark. But before we close with you, let's talk about your first hire with Profasee. Who was the first person that you hired? Was it the data scientist to start working on the product, or was it? I mean, because it's a different field. It's not, like you said, data is completely different than what you did before. So how did you know who to hire first?
Yeah, so I made a lot of mistakes. I talked to a lot of people. I made a lot of mistakes. The org structure you see right now is different from the org structure that we started off with. And some people are really good at different, if you look at a business as a puzzle board, there's puzzle pieces on the board, and sometimes those puzzle pieces get complete and you move on from those puzzle pieces into the next segment of the puzzle board. So those people were very helpful in starting up, but maybe weren't the right piece to get us to the next level of the business. And so the real first hire that really believed, like the first full-time hire that was not a contractor, not a consultant or anything, was Isaiah Pressman, who you'll see on the About Us page. He's a machine learning individual, very, very, very bright, very, I would say, like early part of his career. And shockingly was like crazy enough to join us as the first person. Like he really believed in me. I'm always thankful to him. I always say this to him when I join a call. I'm like, I'm just thankful that you believed and you took a chance, because like there was no customers at that time. There was no website. There wasn't even a name of the company. So he was the first person, and he's been instrumental to our success.
Nice.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. Yeah. So, like Mike mentioned, we're starting to get to the end of this thing. So I wonder if you wouldn't just take a quick minute, let people know how they can connect with you, how they maybe can learn a little bit more about Profasee and the product, maybe get involved, give it a shot. And anything else you'd like to share, sort of parting shots or, final advice.
Yeah. Let's see here. Well, you can go to profasee.com. You can email me at chad@profasee. That's PROFASEE.com. So play on words, right? The word prophecy and then profits you could see. You can find me on LinkedIn, as Mike did, at Chad Rubin. I'm posting stuff there all the time, thoughts. A lot of times it's not even relating to Amazon specifically or AI, but Instagram, it's Chad Rubin. So you can find me anywhere. I'm pretty open and supportive. I wrote a book called Cheaper, Easier, Direct a long time ago, and it's on Amazon if you really want to step in the ring and go D2C. And yeah, hopefully this was really, first of all, I really appreciate the interview, guys, and the thoughtful questions. I feel like we were able to circumvent a lot of BS together and get to the core of it quickly. So that's kudos to you for being good interviewers.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate it, man. Well, yeah. So like Mike said, thanks so much for being a part of the show. I mean, obviously your advice and the advice of other founders like you is critical to our audience. And I think to your point, we're definitely, we're able to achieve a level of transparency that I think will help people avoid some stumbling blocks. So thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate it, Chad.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And see you guys next time.